Everybody, I'm James. I'm alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 14th of 1997. I got sober when I was 15 years old. So yes, I was once young uh, and sober. So that makes me 41 as of yesterday. I don't know that I ever thought I would live this long nor stay sober this long, but yet here I am. I have a home group. My home group is Our Daily Bread meeting, which used to be in person, and now we meet on Zoom. So we're stealing your guys' thunder. And we meet on Thursdays at 45 minutes after you guys start. So anyways, I do have a sponsor and I sponsor people as well. So I just want to start off by saying congratulations to all the people celebrating milestones, and welcome to anyone who's new or coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. What I've found in Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life that works. And I needed a way of life that works because I did not have one when I got here. I don't think my story is much different than anybody else's. I grew up in an alcoholic family. I wasn't aware that it was an alcoholic family. It was my family, which I assumed was normal. I was not really exposed growing up to normal drinking, or what I found out normal drinking was. From my observations, people either drank until they were drunk or they didn't drink at all. I didn't know there was like a middle ground. But I found that out in Alcoholics Anonymous, that there actually is a middle ground, of which I don't know that I ever really participated. But those people exist. Most of them aren't in this meeting, I'm guessing. Like I said, grew up in an alcoholic family. My dad was in the military, so we would move like every 3 years to a new location. And so I got to go through the whole process, finding new friends, new people that I could, that I could hang out with, or that I felt like I could mix with. So I was, constantly feeling kind of out of place. And I hear that from a lot of people in recovery, that they felt like they didn't quite belong. So I would feel that every few years. And growing up in my family, my dad was the drinker, and my mom was what I guess I would refer to as an untreated Al-Anon. I was exposed to alcohol very young. I've got, significant amount of German ancestry. And in Germany, alcohol is especially beer, is not a big deal. So they didn't think anything of, me having beer when I was a toddler or whatever. So I had, I may even have it here somewhere, kind of small beer stein mug that has a teddy bear on it of my name. So they would put some beer in it for me when I was a little kid, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I understood there was something special about alcohol, and I didn't put much thought into it beyond that. But I knew there was something about it, So whenever I had the opportunity to drink, I would, and which when you're a little kid doesn't come very often. And my grandma tells me that I tried to manipulate her into buying me beer on a Sunday in the Bible Belt when I was visiting, which I'm sure didn't go over well with the other people in the store. But, getting what I wanted, especially when what I wanted was alcohol, embarrassment or how other people felt about it was never a huge obstacle for me. Like I said, I grew up in an alcoholic family, and I remember being in middle school, I was so hyper concerned about what everybody thought about me, whether I was going to be able to fit in, especially with moving all the time. And I had some friends over to the house, and my dad was drunk, and he tripped over, something, and tried to blame it on the wind because we were outside. And I just had this feeling of just dread and embarrassment. And I remember making a promise to myself that I would never be like that. I would never be like my dad. I would never do that to my kids, and really meaning it. And that was the first time that I really made a promise about alcohol, or not using alcohol, or not being a drunk. And it was the first one that I made, and I meant. And the problem for me is that I can make these promises and I can really mean them with all my heart, but I'm just not able to keep them. So the first time I got drunk, I was around 11 years old, and I was going back and forth between my grandpa and my dad, taking drinks from what they had, and I had that feeling. If you're an alcoholic, you know that feeling where you're just like everything just is okay. All of a sudden I wasn't thinking at 100 miles an hour about what everybody else was thinking about me or anything like that. It was just everything was okay. And I remember stumbling back with my dad to the house and feeling this connection with him that I had never really felt. And I understood at least a little bit more. I understood maybe why he drank. And I like that feeling, and I wanted more of that. So, my parents would leave money out sometimes, so I would take it. And this is at the time we're living in Germany, and they totally don't give a shit about the drinking age there, which was good for a aspiring alcoholic. So we would go to the next town over to this like big swimming pool complex, and I would take the money that I had taken from my parents, and I'm still 11 years old, so I would get beer, but I would also get candy. And I would like hang out with my friends, and I would drink beer and eat candy. And it was good. Alcohol helped me to fit in, helped me to be more social, helped me to have more fun, right? It was a plus in my life, and it was great. And it just kind of went along like that, where I'd have occasional drinking, but not all the time or anything like that. We end up moving back. Right before I started high school, we ended up moving back to the US to Tucson. And so I'm going through that process again of trying to figure out, where do I belong? Who am I going to hang out with? And at first it's, decent, good people. And then people that are like me, people that drink. And then I started trying out some outside issues as well, and stuff that I never thought I would do. But if it changed the way that I felt, it was worthwhile. And again, things are still going good. I'm still enjoying life. It's still adding to my life. And I started to have not big consequences because of my drinking, but, times where I would make a fool of myself or throw up and try to convince somebody else to clean up after me or stuff like that. And it was never alcohol that was the problem. It was always, I shouldn't have drank that pool water with that alcohol that I was trying to extract from the pool water. It was a bad idea. Or I shouldn't hang out with those people, or I shouldn't drink that brand of liquor, or I shouldn't mix it with those other substances, or whatever the case may be. It was never alcohol that was the problem. Alcohol was the solution. The problem was always, something connected to it that I had to fix. And alcohol starts becoming more and more important part of my life. Now I'm really starting to get rid of the people in my life that don't drink like I do, because people that don't drink like we do look at the way that we drink and they say, hey, you should not do that. You should slow down. You should, maybe take a while away from drinking, take a break. And I didn't want to hear things like that. So the best way to not hear things like that is to not hang out with people that look at alcohol in that way. So my world's getting smaller, and drinking became about just having the will to continue rather than like making my life really fun. It was just like, all right, if I drink, then I got a reason to live today, And back then we had pagers. For any of you that are really young, it's like a shitty one-way cell phone is the best way I can describe it. So I had a page that, from somebody I knew that would have alcohol or something else, I would just drop what I was doing. And sometimes I was school, so I would just leave school and I'd go meet up. I'd do things like play with guns while I was drunk and cross the road without looking. And, because I just didn't value my life very much. When I first got sober, it was in what I like to refer to as like half treatment center, half cult. A friend of mine was going to these meetings, and he said, hey, do you want to come along? So I went along. And what I found in that place was not necessarily the solution, but I found a definition for the problem. People there describe themselves as alcoholics and addicts. When I listened to what they talked about, I said, that's me. That's the way that I think. That's the way that I behave. That's the way that I interact with alcohol. So I knew that I had found my people, but I wasn't yet introduced into the program of recovery, right? Into working the 12 steps. So what my early recovery looked like was just white knuckling it and just like sitting on my hands, trying to find stuff to do and doing whatever I could do to stay sober. I encourage you, if you're new, please find a sponsor. The sponsor is just somebody who's been through the 12 steps before you, and ask them to show you how to do it. Because I didn't do that. And what happened was I was just a drunk without alcohol. So I'm still doing all the same shit. I'm still like breaking shit, breaking the law, causing trouble for other people, except that now, because I don't drink, I think that I should get a pass for it. And when I finally did sit down and work the steps, probably half of my 8-step list were things that I had done in early sobriety, stuff that I couldn't even blame on alcohol. Eventually, I end up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was young, I was different, I was special. So I'm looking for a sponsor. So I had to find the chair of the Young People's Committee, because that, I was important, right? And he was a great sponsor because he just sat down with me and he took me through the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where the program is. And he took me through that book, one paragraph at a time. And we'd stop and say, okay, that's what this means. and he just helped break it down for me. And we went through all the stuff where it talks about that first step, right? Where it talks about the obsession of the mind. It finally explained why I couldn't keep those promises. When I would make those promises about, I'm only going to drink on the weekend, I'm only going to drink 3 days a week, I'm never going to be like that. When I made those promises, I meant them, but I just couldn't keep them, and it explained that to me. And then it talked about the phenomenon of craving, right? Or the physical allergy. And what that looked like for me is that, like, as soon as I start drinking, I'm going to finish the job. And on the rare occasion that I couldn't, it was the worst feeling ever. And that was explained in that book when I went through that with my sponsor. And he didn't tell me you're an alcoholic or nobody gets here by mistake. He said, this is what an alcoholic is. Compare that to your experience. Is that you? And I found out it was me, and I'm so grateful for having had that experience. And we just continued on working through the steps. I remember going through and just, especially when I sat down to do my 4-step inventory, and there's an example in the book about how to write it out. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd call him over and over, like, what do I do? What do I do? But when I started getting that stuff down on paper, that's when I really started to get free. Because I had experienced, just like when I was stuck in that loop of active alcoholism, I had experienced this loop of dry alcoholism. When I got into the steps, that started to change, and things started to get better. And I started to feel free. And the biggest thing for me was that I talked a little earlier about early sobriety was just sitting on my hands, white knuckling it, doing everything I could to not drink. As I went through the steps, alcohol problem was removed. I didn't think about alcohol any more than I thought about some food that I don't like, right? It wasn't a big deal to me. And that was true freedom for me, because when I got here, like, really what I wanted to not drink, and I wanted to not want to blow my brains out. That's really what I wanted when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I couldn't do those two things at once. I couldn't not drink and not want to blow my brains out. It was like drinking was a way that I was able to stay alive, but yet if I didn't have alcohol, what the hell am I going to do? And going through those 12 steps with my sponsor, it kind of taught me about what do I do, right? Or how do I deal with life? How do I deal with disappointment? How do I deal with being happy? How do I deal with other people? How do I deal with responsibility? Like, all this stuff. I learned all of that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had all sorts of like ups and downs in sobriety. When I was maybe 6 or 7 years sober, I spent like 2.5 months in a wheelchair after crashing a motorcycle, just being stupid. But people in Alcoholics Anonymous really showed up for me. I had a friend who was like working full time and I think going to school full time. And she would come and read the big book with me while I'd stuck in the hospital every day. And that's the kind of thing that we're taught to do for each other in Alcoholics Anonymous is to show up, to be that helping hand. Because I just didn't think that way before I got here, right? It was always like, if I was doing something nice, there was a reason. It was because I wanted you in my favor, so I could get something from you. I was taught how to just do stuff because it's the right thing to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've had all sorts of opportunities in sobriety that I never would have had if I was still drinking. I actually fucked up college while sober initially. And I would get frustrated because in meetings, people would talk about, screwing up college when they were drunk. And I'm like, well, I did that sober. So I was afraid. I didn't even know if I'd be able to go back. But what I did was I just took what I learned in AA to school. And while I was taught in AA, you show up on time, you listen. If you have questions, you ask. You try to be helpful, right? So I did the same thing at school. And it turns out that stuff works really well there too. I ended up getting, from when I went back to school to when I graduated, I had a 4.0 the whole time through, and it was just by practicing what I had learned here, right? And then I started getting these professional opportunities where people would put me, in charge of stuff that I just really felt like if they knew what went on in my head and if they knew who I really was, they would never have made the decision to give me any position of responsibility. But you know what? People in AA did that for me when I was new. They gave me the opportunity to be of service. I remember being on the ASCIPA, the Arizona Young People's State Conference. On that committee, they made me the registration chair, and I was nuts, but they gave me the responsibility, and it gave me something to do, so I wasn't thinking about myself. And I was able to translate that experience into like how to behave in the outside world. How do I, when I'm handed a responsibility, what do I do with that? I ended up having a job where I got to travel around all the time and teach other people how to do stuff. And the company I worked for would like send me as their representative, these big companies. And it was crazy. And today I get to work on stuff that would have been a dream for me as a little kid. And that's all because I just kept showing up and I kept doing the work and I asked for help and I try to be helpful. Like I said, when I got here, it wasn't about like, oh, I hope that I can do well in college and be successful and have good opportunities. And, none of that was what I was thinking about when I got here. All I wanted was to not drink, to not want to blow my brains out. That's all I wanted when I got here. But the solution to that was the solution to everything else, right? The solution to not wanting to drink, right? And not wanting to blow my brains out. That was that same solution to like, how do I live life and how do I do something with myself? I followed that and it works. And I encourage anybody who's new or who's coming back, like, please, number one, please keep coming back. And number two, find somebody who's been through this process, who's done it before, and just ask them to show you how. The opportunities are endless. I think I've talked enough. Again, thank you for asking me to come speak. And it's always good to be at a meeting about Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.